Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Are You Listening? I just want to say thank you for coming back again and again and again. I have had a real kind of whirlwind of a week. I'm pretty sure in the last episode I can't actually remember if I did speak about this, but in the last less than 2 weeks I have gained I think it's 2,000 followers on TikTok, which I know doesn't sound like a lot. But in the grand scheme of things, I gained most of them followers in the space of a few days. And the whole point of that TikTok account is basically to drive people to this podcast, which it is. I am not saying I've got loads of people listening. I've got analytics obviously coming out my ear rolls, which I haven't. But the fact that I am reaching people in other countries, women all over the world, and women are actually coming back and giving me really good positive feedback, as well as obviously people I know, clients, friends, family, things like that, is incredible. So thank you for listening. I'm going to jump straight into the episode basically. But today through my thoughts list, the one that stood out to me that I think probably would, resonate with a lot of women, men as well, but a lot of women at the age that I'm at, is why I stopped drinking, but without going sober. So I'm not sober, but I have pretty much stopped drinking, and I thought this was a really good topic to talk about that, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to. So let's just get straight into it. So I want to make it very clear that I am not sober. I am not teetotal. I don't not drink at all. Definitely not in the traditional sense, but my relationship with alcohol has definitely changed a lot. Well, massively in the last few years especially, and as I've gone into my late 20s, going into my 30s, I used to be out every weekend, and now I've pretty much barely touched alcohol in years. I kind of wanted to start at the very beginning of how this started, because a lot of people will probably agree with me on this, that especially in the area I was in, drinking culture started young. I remember being 13 and going to friends' 13th birthday parties and having WKDs and Smirnoff Ices and things like that. And I think at that age my parents, they knew I was going to these parties, there was going to be for some drinks there, but also most of the time there were parents there. So you'd have a few drinks, you feel a little bit tipsy, and wake up with a hangover the next day, which wasn't a hangover. I think you were just tired the next day. And I think, me, all my friends, all my groups of friends, being at school, everyone was kind of doing the same thing. And I think before I was 18, I'd been to bars and I'd been to clubs and things like that. And this was back, anyone that's listened to this that's younger than I am, the thought of that now is probably wild, because everywhere, IDs, scans IDs, things like that. And back then, they didn't. They literally didn't. You could go to a bar in London and just say you forgot your ID and they would let me in. A few of my friends had older siblings that they would share ID, but I didn't. And I've always been tall, so I used to be the one that would just try, well, let's go, and if I get in, I get in. And I don't think I ever got turned away. So I think that, that started very young. And by 18, the novelty of clubbing, not that it got boring, but I had been to clubs and I had been drinking, and me and my friends had done all of that. And I also, outside of school, I also had another group of friends because I grew up dancing, and a lot of them girls were older than me and the other girls I was friends with there. So they were turning 18, 21, and we were 15, 16, 17, some of them were really young, 13, 14, and we were going to parties full of 18-year-olds and 21-year-olds. And then when we kind of got old enough to start going out with them, we were doing that even before even some of my other friends. So I was kind of surrounded by that from quite an early age. And then I would probably say that between 22 to about 26, it was obviously excluding lockdown because you couldn't do anything in lockdown. I was going out every weekend, just having a really good time and things like that with my friends. And that kind of is the social norm, I suppose, or what people expect you to be doing in your 20s. Like, if you wasn't doing that in your 20s, you'd be considered boring. Or I even remember, like, it was so normal for if you were going on a night out and one of your friends was like, I'm not drinking, you'd be like, you're so fucking boring. Like, why are you not drinking? Or that I'm driving, you'd be like, no, you're boring, you're boring. And the thought of that now is mental. Like, if I was to go out now and one of my friends said they weren't drinking, like, I wouldn't even dream of saying you're boring. I would be like, is everything okay? And if they're like, yeah, I just don't fancy it, I'd be like, sweet, like, that's the end of it. But then it was so like, yeah, you're boring. And I 100% was guilty of this. I 100% fed into the mindset. I remember there was a few times when we first started going clubbing, and one of my friends, she would work on a Saturday, which I suppose I did as well, but she worked on a Saturday and she was like, I'm not going to drink because I'm driving, because I'm working tomorrow. And I'd be like, no, you're boring, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. And that's actually really damaging. Like, it's not boring to not have a drink, but yeah, kind of the culture of it was exactly what that is. It seemed boring to not do that. What I would say is there was a really big shift going into like my later 20s, where I think drinking stopped being so fun. It wasn't even necessarily the nights out, it was actually the drinking that stopped being fun for me. It started to trigger real anxiety for me. And it wasn't in that typical anxiety, because I know there's a lot of people that are going to listen and be like, oh, I get anxiety, or what did I do the night before? It wasn't that. Like, I get that. I do get that feeling, but I didn't really ever feel like that, because I would say even if I had a drink, like, I was always very, like, in control. But it was more like I'd get it on the night or in the middle of the night when I got home. So, like, it started as I would come home from a night out, I'd go to bed, fall asleep, and then a few hours later I'd wake up in a panic, like heart racing, like I can't breathe and on the verge of a panic attack. And when I actually sit and thought about what was the reason for that, sometimes there was no reason, but sometimes it was like the anxiety of knowing I was going to be hungover the next day, which I've always hated that feeling. But a lot of the sometimes I wouldn't even wake up hungover, and I would still be that raging anxiety. I remember being on holiday a few years ago with my partner and his mum, and because it was we was away for her 50th birthday, and she wanted us to have a drink with her. Now, even at this point, me and my boyfriend weren't big drinkers, but we were like, do you know what? It's her birthday. We'll have some drinks. And I remember even being on holiday, waking up. We went to bed. I woke up a few hours later with, like, on the verge of a panic attack. Like, it's the awful feeling of just being anxious. And I just hated that. But then the problem is as time went on, the anxiety then started creeping into my actual nights out. So that actually started to make drinking feel uneasy. I would be in the middle of a night out, have a few drinks in, and that anxiety would start to come in. And this completely took the fun out of nights out, and it just stopped being worth it. It would even get to the point where I'd like have one or two, and even if I now feel that tipsy feeling, it makes me it triggers an anxiety, which to me, an anxiety feeling, if drinking comes with that, it's just not worth it. And it just really stopped being worth it and being fun. So over time, I just made a bit of a gradual change where it was like I just started to cut back and just have maybe one or two drinks I enjoy. And listen, I'm not saying I wouldn't do that. We went on holiday last year and we was in Italy, and I fancied an Aperol, so I had an Aperol like a few nights while we were away. Just one, maybe didn't even finish the one. And really enjoy it. I love an Aperol. I love a margarita, things like that. A really yummy cocktail. But I genuinely couldn't tell you the last time I was drunk. I remember going on holiday with my friends a few years ago. We went to Germany and then we went to Amsterdam, and even on them nights out I was having like maybe 2 Coronas, maybe, again because I enjoy that, or like a Desperado or something because I enjoy that, and then get to that point and being like, I'm done, don't want any more. But yeah, I haven't had been drunk in years. I don't see myself I don't want to say being drunk ever again, but at the moment, I don't see myself being drunk ever again. The last time I had alcohol was actually half a cocktail on New Year's Eve, which, again, we was on holiday, and it's just nice to have like a few sips of something sometimes. But yeah, I had a few sips and I was just like, this isn't worth it. Like, I really love a mocktail because mocktails usually taste better and you can just drink them without feeling it. I also think that moving in with my boyfriend and, I don't know, building a healthier relationship with, well, a healthy relationship with him, but building a healthier relationship with myself, just slowed down the natural social side of things. That, you know, because of them wasn't drinking, I obviously didn't want to go to a bar. Like, it's nice sometimes going, but most of the time you don't want to. You're surrounded by people who are drunk, they're bumping into you. There is nothing worse than being the one who's sober and everyone's bumping into you and you just get frustrated. When you're drunk, you don't care, but when you are the one that's sober, or your friends are telling you the same thing over and over and over, and to be honest, it's just really annoying, and I just can't really bear that. And I don't want to say that I didn't actually love going out, but I think it made me realise that, or over the years, it's just made me realise, I think I thought I was supposed to love going out, so that's why I loved it. Yeah, I don't know. I just think that gradual change just made me realise that maybe I didn't actually enjoy it as much as I thought I did. And what I've probably gained from it is that, like, I've always loved my Sundays because I work a lot of the week because I'm self-employed. Sundays are the only day that I don't work on a Sunday. I don't do any work. And if I'm waking up hungover on a Sunday, again, that would make me feel anxious because I haven't had a day to myself to feel good, to do things I enjoy, or just to chill. Like, you cannot just relax if you're hungover. Like, you can't. And obviously, you know, the older you get, your hangovers obviously last a few days rather than the day or half a day. But yeah, but I love my Sundays. I love waking up fresh, and I enjoy it being my day off. You know, I love going out for a walk, getting a coffee, just kind of pottering around. And I can't do that if I'm hungover. So, you know, it means I could be more productive, more present, and we could do things with family. I'm not just in bed, I'm not just moping around, which again just makes you feel anxious and awful. And I just like to choose to do more wholesome things now, and I suppose now I've got more time to do that. You know, instead of working all week and then, you know, getting to a Saturday, finishing work, getting ready, going out on a Saturday, and then being hungover the Sunday to start the week all over again. Now it's like I get to finish work on a Saturday, I can come home, I can maybe go for dinner. On a Sunday I could go to Pilates, I could go for brunch, I can go for walks, I can go and do them wholesome things instead of being hungover and that completely ruining that, I suppose. I also think one of the big shifts that I didn't expect, which seems really obvious now, but I didn't expect, was that, you know, I moved out like 2 years ago now, and that actually had a very, very big shift on how much I was going out drinking and stuff, because I couldn't justify, or I actually could not physically afford to go out and spend, you know, £100 on a night out or on drinking. I think no one tells you when you first move out how much of a budget change it is for you. You know, you go from having all this extra money to going and spending it on whatever you want. If I will disclosure, if you was lucky enough to not have to pay rent and obviously pay towards living at home with your parents or with a parent, I didn't have to do that. So I did have a lot of extra money to do these things. So when I did move out, it was a bit of a shock to the system because it was like, God, actually, you know, I've got to save that extra money for food, and I've got to save that extra money for rent and bills that I've never had to pay for, and the extra money has got to go on them things, and I physically didn't have any money left at the end of the month to go out drinking and going out partying and stuff, so that really pulled me back very quickly. And I think it then started to feel really good to say no without having FOMO. I had a lot of FOMO when I couldn't go to things when I was younger. I don't get FOMO now. Only time I ever get FOMO is if the girls were having like a takeaway night and I couldn't go. I'd have the biggest FOMO about that because I just think, oh, I love that. Or if they were going to like for a walk and I couldn't go, or going for breakfast I couldn't go. They are the things that I'm now getting FOMO about, which yeah, I never felt like that before. It was always, I can't go out with my friends, I'm missing out. And they're going to have the best night ever and they're going to talk about that night for the rest of our lives, and I miss out because I feel like we've all had them times where we couldn't go. And then you're around with your friends and that is the time that is brought up. Oh, do you remember that night out? Or do you remember that holiday and things like that? I remember the first girls' holiday that the girls went on, I couldn't go when we were 18. I couldn't go because I was still dancing at the time and it was across my dance show, so I missed it. And I was so like, as much as I didn't care to miss it because I loved dancing and my dance shows were the most incredible things of my life and I loved them, I obviously got a lot of FOMO because it's the first girls' holiday, and I went on the one the next year instead. But they still talk about that time, and it's so weird to think like, well, I wasn't there. Whereas the girls' holidays after that, like I was there. The girls even went away last year to just a little holiday to Tenerife, and it wasn't like a big drinking holiday, but I didn't even go to that because, again, I was starting to go through this period of not wanting to drink so much. And although, again, at the time I was like, money I just couldn't justify to do the holiday because I'd done a lot of other things that year, but I was worried about, if they want to go to bars and stuff and drink and that, then it sometimes is weird to place yourself as the sober one in them environments. So yeah, I just think with not drinking also comes a weird pressure of not drinking, and I think there's these weird social assumptions, especially the age I am now, that if I'm not drinking, then are you pregnant? Are you trying? Are you doing this? And it's like, no, like I'm not doing any of that. I just don't fancy it. And the one thing that's probably been the easiest way for me to pull back on drinking is that I don't have a normal corporate job. I work in a studio at the end of my parents' garden. I finish work, I get in the car and I drive home. Whereas not colleagues, clients, friends, boyfriend, all of them sort of people, all that work in corporate jobs, it is so hard to get away from it. You leave work, should we go for a drink? Oh, come on, let's go for a drink. Well, you're meeting clients and things like that and you can't say no. And then even when you're out there, say like you do go, oh, I'll go for one, or I'll go and I won't drink. It almost feels mandatory to then drink because you're the young one, because you haven't got kids to go home to, because you're this, because you're that. Why are you not drinking? Oh, no, just have one, I'll buy you one. And then, they're buying you one, so you feel like you have to drink it. They're pressured or questioned if they say no. I just think your age, environment and industry, I suppose it affects that pressure, and maybe because that pressure doesn't exist for me, I find it's much, much easier to say, well, no, or just to not even get the opportunity to go. But I do think that is a bit of an issue. I've got a lot of clients that, are in jobs where they have to go and have dinner with clients, and if they go to these things and they're like, no, I'm not drinking, you can't get away with that. And I've got one client in particular in mind who has said, every time, like, are you pregnant? Are you trying? Are you doing this? And she has to then drink to almost prove that that's not the case, which is so wrong. Like, why can it just not be accepted that, you might have something on the next day, you might be going away the next day, you might have work the next day. A lot of these things are also midweek, and it's just normal to then go into work on a Wednesday hungover, which I find crazy. And I could never do my job now, especially on a hangover. I did it a few times and it's just awful, and I think I learned very, very quickly early on that can't do that, cannot do that, be concentrating, and with these sharp tweezers and stuff, like physically I can't do it. So I want to make it clear that, like, I'm not anti-alcohol, but what I would say is I just value different things a lot more. Like my health, I would say I'm a lot healthier not drinking. My peace in a way as well, like knowing that it makes me anxious to drink, and it makes me anxious to even have one or two, what is the point? There is no point. And I'm not saying I will never ever have a drink again. We go on holiday in a month's time, and we're going on a really beautiful holiday, and if there's a night I fancy having a cocktail, it's not like I'm like, no, I don't drink. It really is just, I think more than anything, it's just like giving yourself the choice. Like, if you don't want it, you don't have to have it. You don't have to have it at all. I also handle social situations just differently now. And yeah, just enjoy having a drink if I genuinely feel like it, not because I'm out. We went to a friend's last week for a barbecue. Really chilled, like nothing crazy, but she'd made Pims and she had ciders and stuff, and like these are all drinks I really like, but I actively chose to drive because I knew that I was like, I will not fancy it, and what's the point? Like, what, we pay a fortune on a cab for me to then maybe have one or two that I don't really want to have. And I still had just good a time, and even my partner that came with me, like, he didn't have a drink, and everyone else was having a drink, and we didn't feel like, oh, do you know what, because everyone's having a drink, I feel like we should, or like, are we being boring by not having one? It didn't feel like that at all. And if one or two of them asked, because I don't see them as often, and I literally just said what I'm saying in this podcast now, that it's just more of like a choice now, rather than, it doesn't make me feel good, so I just don't fancy it. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to say this, like, you give yourself permission to make your own rules with alcohol, but at the same time, like, give others permission to make their own choices with alcohol. The pressure thing, I feels like, isn't as bad now, and even clients that are young, they're like 18, just going out, from what I hear, what they talk about, it doesn't sound like their friends are pressuring so much, or, oh my god, why are you not having a drink? Like, it's just a bit more accepted. And I don't know whether times have just moved on, and people just are more accepting of each other in that sort of way, but it definitely wasn't like that when I first started going out. It was a lot more like, yeah, I mean, there was pressure there, like, don't be boring, do you want a shot? Now you got to have a shot, like, pressure people too. And also, it just made me think about kind of reframing what fun looks like. And for me, it's now just not about the drink, it's about who I'm with, where I am, what I'm doing. And I find that a lot more enjoyable now than, well, I'll go out for a drink. It'll be, if I fancy going to a bar or going somewhere with my friends where I can have a boogie, the fact that I also feel like I don't have to have a drink is, I don't know, it's nice to have the choice. And yeah, I just feel a lot better, to be completely honest. And I just think, if you're thinking about, or you're worried about, going out with friends and saying you don't want to drink so much, or you're just feeling like, I just don't want to, then, like, you absolutely can. So yeah, I mean, I think if you told me at 22 that I'd basically stopped drinking in my late 20s, then I would have laughed. But now I wouldn't change that. I wouldn't, go back to how it was. I think even if I fancied having a drink more often, it would still be, if I fancy it, a drink I really enjoy, one or two. I'm over that anxiety feeling. I'm over the hungover feeling. And I think it's okay to outgrow that lifestyle. I think it is. I don't, just make sure that you don't let other people kind of pressure you into feeling different about that. So yeah, that is today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed it, and please, if you are listening to this on Spotify, like, comment, whatever I think you can comment, review the podcast, because that makes such a difference. Send it to anyone that you think would also relate to the topic that I'm talking about today, and talk about alcohol and stuff. Send it to your friends. And if you are watching this on YouTube, comment, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. But otherwise, I will see you all in my next one. Bye, guys.